Welcome to Prayer and Bible Band, Lesson 12. I do not own the rights to this music. Today's topic is the eyes of the Lord. The background reading is coming out of 2 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 9. Ezekiel chapter 7, verse 9. Psalms chapter 33, verse 19. Psalms chapter 34, verse 15. Proverbs chapter 5, verse 21. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 12. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 12. The devotional reading is coming out of Deuteronomy chapter 11, verses 9 through 17. The central verse. I will read the King James Version first and then the New International Version. Of Proverbs chapter 15, verse 3. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. The New International Version. The eyes of the Lord are everywhere, keeping watch on the wicked and the good. The key terms for today's lesson: recompense, omnipresence, limitlessness. Recompense, to give something to you by way of compensation, as for a service rendered or damage incurred, to return in kind. Omnipresence, the quality or state of being present in all places. Limitlessness, something that has no bounds, no restraints, or no confines. The introduction says, the eye is made up of three distinct parts: the cornea, which includes the pupil and the iris. Then we have the lens, which combines with the cornea to focus light correctly on the next part, which is the retina. When light hits the retina, the light travels into the optic nerve to the brain, which turns the signals into the image a person sees. Each part of the eye works together to help a person see. God is not like humans who have a physical body with hands, feet, or eyes, for He is a spirit who is omnipresent. But the believer must remember that God made man in His likeness and His image. God gave man the ability to see. This ability is like God's, but man's presence is not everywhere like God's. God's presence is everywhere, so His eyes are everywhere. He is all-knowing and all-seeing, and this gives Him a limitless ability to see. God is always watching His children, and He always pays attention to what is going on in their lives. God gives each child His attention and concern, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But special individual attention is given to the righteous, and His ears are always attentive to their cry. It should give the believer a sense of comfort, just knowing that God's eye has him always covered. Psalms 34, verse 15, for His eyes are upon the righteous, and His ears are open unto their cry. The discussion. God told Israel that in the day of trouble and evil comes, He would see, but His eyes will not pity them. He told them that He would recompense them according to their ways, not what someone has done to them, for He is God. See Ezekiel chapter 7. God is a God of justice. He is a righteous God and will always deal righteously with His children. God is a God of love. He loves His children so very much that He constantly looks out for them. Any parent who loves their children is always finding ways to keep their eyes on them. Sometimes they will ask a friend to keep their eyes on their kids while they are busy doing something else. Well, God does not have to assign someone else to watch over His children, because His eyes are always viewing them. For the eyes of the Lord are in every place, looking at the good and the ugly. The eye of the Lord travels all over the earth with a purpose. He wants His children to see His strength on behalf of those whose hearts are perfect toward Him. Proverbs tells the believer that the ways of man are before the eyes of the Lord, and He pondereth all His goings. God does not miss a move that man makes. His eyes observe everything that man does. For the eyes of the Lord preserves knowledge. He guards it with a passion, and he will have nothing to do with deception, which is one of Satan's most powerful tools that he uses against the saints of God. If it were possible, Satan would deceive the very elect of God, but he will not allow his elect to be deceived. The children of Israel had been in Egypt for over 400 years, and God had sent Moses to lead them out of Egypt to the promised land. Moses told the people that if they would love God and kept all of his commandments, they would be strong enough to go into the land and possess it. And God would help them to stay in this land that flows with milk and honey. He told them that this new land was not like Egypt, where they had to labor hard, sowing and harvesting seed, watering it to have a garden of herbs. They no longer had to experience the lash of the overseer's whip. But the land where they were going was a land of hills and valleys, where God's rain provided drinking water. This was the land that God cared for, and the eyes of the Lord were always upon it, looking after it from one year to another. God promised them that if they would continue to love, trust, and obey him, they would always be blessed with the absolute best. They were to instruct their children and the generations coming that God's eyes would always be upon them, looking out for them. The conclusion says, the saints of God must always remember that they too should love, trust, and obey God's commandments, because they are the seed of Abraham. And that's Galatians chapter 3, verse 29. God's eyes would always be over them, looking out for them, making sure that they are numbered among those who are blessed. God would make sure that the promises he made to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 and 2 would always be available to them based on the conditions that he made. The word tells the believer that one day he will be required to give an account of every deed that is done in his body. This lets the believer know there's an eye that watches everything, and someone is recording everything. God is a record of everybody. His eyes are in every place, looking at the good and the evil. The questions for today's lesson. Number 1, what is so special and different about God's eyes? Number 2, what is the difference between God's eyes and man's eyes? Number 3, what did Moses tell the Israelites about God's eyes? And number 4, why are God's eyes on the good and the evil? I'm going to repeat that. Why are God's eyes on the good and the evil? The essential thought: God sees everything and he knows everything about his children. The end. God bless you and thank you for joining me today.